Thank you. This is the second round of doing the I don't know how to call it, but not a webinar, not I mean it is mindset, but it's kind of in a conversational type of format. We got really good feedback before,
Love that.
which is great because it's more conversational. And I know you have notes, and I'm excited to hear it. But the topic of today is what? Because I thought about this, and it's
I mean, I've been like literally thinking about this since we decided on it, but you know, there's never a more appropriate time in our community as right now to talk about how to navigate family relationships during the holidays. One, because the holidays are upon us, right? So like Thanksgiving is a couple weeks away. The moment Safeway puts out the jarred cranberry sauce on a prominent end of the aisle, you're like, we're on. It's time.
Well, also the marketing machine gets like all the holidays get further and further. Like I'm seeing Christmas stuff out and my body can't take it. I heard a Christmas jingle in a store the other day and I shut down a little bit. But here's what I was thinking about this too, is like, we should have a takeaway that people can use. I'm not the one to say this, by the way. I'm not the
I like that you're preemptively laughing at your.
No, because I was thinking about this and I was thinking, how to have tough conversations during the holidays. In my mind, it's like it's sitting around with your family or whatever. So if it doesn't fit in the sentence of, hey, Uncle Bob blank, can you pass the gravy? If that conversation leads to like Uncle Bob not wanting to pass you the gravy, maybe we reconsider the announcement that we're having in that family forum. Right?
Yeah. I mean, I would argue, so full disclosure, I come from a non-perfect family. I don't know that there are many people out there that have perfect families or what they would call perfect families, but like we go to my husband's sisters, my sister-in-law's house every year for Christmas. We have since we got married 1,000 years ago. And that is like a little bubble. Like I love being there. Everything is safe. If we have difficult conversations, the difficult conversations don't really feel that difficult. And so I think sometimes I have to stop and like be really grateful that there's a place that I can go with family that feels safe. But on the other side of my family, sometimes it's more difficult because the conversations are less free-flowing and less kind and compassionate. So I just, full disclosure, I don't come from a perfect family. I don't have all the answers, but I will help you figure out how to best kind of show up for your family.
Here's what I find interesting, because I have some experience culturally as well that has some huge differences.
Yeah.
Half Japanese, so on the Japanese side, everyone is unbelievably respectful and reserved, and things that you do not discuss is pretty much everything except for past the gravy. No, you don't discuss religion and politics and anything controversial. That's just not a thing that you do. And in fact, that's probably discouraged, if anything. And that's a huge family. So, I mean, it is not uncommon for us to be in a room and maybe 60 to 70 to 80 of us in the room. So it's a big family, right? So also maybe size contributes to like who wants to have an all-out. I mean, not to suggest in everything that you want to share is controversial, but I'm saying who wants to have that kind of conversation. Whereas I've been on the other side, smaller family, more American versus Asian.
Yeah.
And I think some of it comes from the top, meaning it's either the monarch or the patriarch of the family. If they're loud, boisterous, or opinionated, it's like that, it almost sets the tone for like, this is what I've been there before, where it's like, this is the conversation we're discussing. And we're like,
you better like it.
Oh, okay. And oddly enough, though, I kind of try to, personally, I try to take a back seat to that, because I do want the gravy, please. I don't want to have the whole weirdness, in between, but
like, please don't make me agree with you or co-sign with you to get gravy for my mashed potatoes.
Exactly.
I just want to pour the gravy on my mashed potatoes and be delicious.
Sometimes sometimes organically things come up and you got to discuss it, but we're kind of just, chit-chatting about it before. This is a weird time that we're in,
right?
Socially and everything else. And I do appreciate where you and I began this conversation prior to the camera going on was, I appreciate speaking politically and not talking about politics. We're not having a political debate, fortunately. But speaking about politics, it's very divisive. It's very sensitive because I think people get tribal. They want to dive into their community for what they feel is right, which is great. I'm not talking about sides. I'm just talking about the fact that people
Sure.
do that is great. The fact that our country, we have a right to vote is phenomenal.
Like such a privilege.
Such a privilege.
Like have our voice be heard.
Absolutely.
100%.
With that said, then it gets into very specific nuances, interpretations, and the tribal concept is both good and bad,
Yeah.
right? It can get that way. So one of the things, and my agents know, on election day, I sent out an email, right? So it was like, guys, let's keep it professional.
You read it.
You know, everyone read it.
I'm teasing.
Yeah. Let's keep it professional. Let's make sure that everyone knows, and no pun intended, but you know, we are kind of like politicians in that we're in a public forum, and we can absolutely lose a client or lose respect from the public or from our clientele or from our demographic that we serve or whatever the case might be by having a political affiliation that's opposite of what theirs is. But you're not, I mean, in other words, what do you have to gain? Like, you have to be professional. It's so divisive right now. It's not a benign topic. Now, with that being said, I'm also not suggesting that you don't be authentic and be yourself and whatever, but it is an unbelievable line that you have to walk. And usually, I mean, there are people that have benign posts like, hey, I voted, awesome. But the moment you suggest who or for what, if you read the comments, it gets very dark. It can turn very, very quick. And so with that being said, this is not a political debate or conversation, but sometimes that now carries over, right? Because every 4 years, it's Thanksgiving and we got the thing happening, and
even every two,
sure,
to some extent, right? Like, so
sure,
for folks who maybe nationally are kind of less invested, but locally have really strong feelings about what happens in their community. Like, in some ways, we are inundated with some sort of political conversation all the time. Like, we really don't get a whole lot of reprieve.
Yeah, I mean, so one thing that I asked you, and I don't know, this is my feeling, I don't know if it's right or wrong or how you entered into the subject, but for me, it's like, well, what is your goal? Well, if you're entering, if we're having dinner right now,
right,
and you and I are at dinner with all of our friends and family together, if I feel like I got to make an announcement, whatever that announcement is politically, you know, around the subject of politics, whatever that might be, am I hoping, like, what's my goal? Is my goal self-serving? Is my goal to convince? Is my goal to sway opinions? And then my question would be, is that the right forum to do that, right? To have that kind of conversation, because and also I also feel kind of odd that some people take it upon themselves to do almost missionary work politically, to go, let me save you.
Right.
Let me, you know,
from yourself.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's almost like, but the person's got to raise their hand and want to have that dialogue. I'm not saying want to be saved. No one needs to be saved. They have the right to their opinion, and so does everyone else. But it's like, some people just take it upon themselves. Like, let me just tell you what's wrong with your opinion. And it's like, oh my gosh, then that's easy to feel like a personal attack.
Yeah.
Because you're like, wait a minute, I have all my time and energy invested into the thing that I did or believe in.
Right.
And
like, fiercely.
Yeah. And that now you just feel like you're attacking, like, I can't think the way I think. Now you're trying to sway me into something else. So I also think what's the intention? Is your intention to be heard? Is your intention to convince or sway? I don't know. My point is, I'm not a huge fan of having political or even religious conversations.
Well,
Wars
we need
are started.
whole other hour for religious conversations, because there are so many evolutions of what having a conversation about religion looks like. And I think really honestly what you've just highlighted is there are so many layers to who we are as humans.
Yeah.
So there's fundamentally what we believe, right? So this is your core value. This is like at your very centermost. What is the thing, you know, the old saying of like, what's the hill you would die on? Like, what's the thing? Ultimately, you know, one of my main core values is kindness.
Yeah.
So if I can't do something in kindness, I'm not going to do it.
Yeah.
And a lot of times that will prevent me from getting argumentative, because when I get argumentative, I get very, very, very indignant. Alan's here. Hi.
Can I add something which is interesting? You know that book that you showed me prior to? I think the word hope is in there.
Well, that's the
Right?
title. Notes on Hope.
So what's interesting about that, I think, in terms of core value and what have you, is what do us as humans want when we talk about the things that become tricky topics, politics being one of them, religion being another. It's hope. It's tied to hope. People want to have hope for better, hope for a better life independently, hope for better lives for their children and grandchildren, hope for better lives for everyone. And it's such a big and sensitive topic that I think that if they feel as though it doesn't even matter if it's your sister, best friend, whatever it is, on the other side is trying to penetrate that bubble of hope. It's like you're trying to steal the hope to happiness, the hope to better, hope to whatever it is, whether the topic is religion or politics or whatever it is.
And I think part of what's happened sort of this week, so that we don't have like a pink elephant in the room, part of what's happened, if we can deduce it, is there's this evolution of polarization. So where we used to be able to get together and have conversations that were difficult, that were also respectful, we've largely come away from that, because there's extremity happening, right? There's like, no, this is it. Rather than, as I've shared with, I'm sure many of you, I live in a very, very gray world where there's room for lots and lots and lots of things. At my very core as a therapist, I'm a harm reductionist, right? So I believe that if we are constantly in the pursuit of reducing harm, we are on the right track. And that counts for everything from over-exercise, overindulgence, all the way to drug and alcohol use. So if we talk about those layers, right, there's this, my first recommendation to any of you at the holidays is like, always wear something soft. Like wear a soft sweater, wear shoes that are really comfortable,
but strap pillows to myself and just
like
walking
really honestly, if nothing else, create some sort of softness that you can tie yourself to. So wear something that's comfortable for you, wear something that you feel safe in, because as much as we laugh about it because it sounds silly, this is one place that you can actually like immediately go back to and just like sit in. You can, okay, I'm safe, right? And then as you start to think about where you put yourself during the holidays, make a really concentrated and intentional decision about where you are going to go. So if Uncle Bob is the guy that sets off your nervous system, maybe there's an opportunity for you to create a different tradition for your holiday. You know that I've done a lot of work in the space of narcissism, and a lot of my clients are really dealing with relationships where they've identified that their partner or boss or sister, brother, mother, auntie, whoever is really exhibiting a lot of traits of that. And the ideas that have come out of the last couple of years of having these discussions with folks is sometimes the safe thing is to set the boundary and allow the holiday to belong to you. You, whatever you want, whether that's your family, you know, your intimate family, whether that's alone and by yourself, which, let me just be clear, there's nothing wrong with spending a holiday in solitude. And then this kind of third layer, so there's the softness, right? And the core value stuff. And then there's the, where do I put myself in the community? And then thirdly, there's what am I going to allow and what am I not going to allow? And that comes back to the discussions that we always have around boundaries, and knowing that boundaries are not requests that you make of other people. They're not things you're asking other people to do. They're things that you will not tolerate. And then setting those boundaries in a way that's respectful to the people that you're with. So if I can encourage you to, when you're considering what you do for the holidays and going forward, right? You can use it this week. We're having very polarizing conversations this week. If I can encourage you to do something, it's really to check in with like how you feel internally. So your nervous system, your parasympathetic nervous system, your autonomy. Like, where do I feel safe and where do I feel unsafe? And then kind of working through that.
Yeah, I think that's great. Also, does that go in line with if some of, like for me, I've turned off or not paying attention to social media as much because I can't control, we can control the people, we can control me. But I see some of the dialogue on social media with regards to, we're talking about, in this case, the election.
Yeah.
It gets crazy. I don't want
Right.
to, and it's not a side issue. I don't care about that, but it's just people aren't being, to your point, they're not being kind. They're being kind of, on both sides, kind of going back and forth. And I don't want to participate. I don't want to jump in that pool.
Sure.
So I literally have not been on certain social media things just to avoid that kind of nonsense or minimize it as much as I can.
I have to tell you that there's a thumbs down on the screen.
Okay. I'm sorry, I'll check my social media more often. I'll jump in the pool then.
Yeah. Several of the conversations I've had this week are around what do I allow myself to do and what do I not allow myself to do? So I doom scrolled.
That's what I mean though.
For an entire night.
Yeah.
And I happened to be on TikTok, that was the doom scrolling. Now, mind you, there are algorithms and science and all this kind of stuff. So like my algorithm is showing me what it thinks I want to see. And so when I wake up the next morning and I feel bad, I have to remember that I feel bad because I've overconsumed the doom scroll.
Right.
But I also have to remember that that is not an opportunity for me to then say, I'm such an idiot. Like, why would I do that? It's really an opportunity for me to recognize that like I got to a point where I needed to do something that was completely just escapism.
Sure.
And the goal of therapy, the goal of coaching, the goal of bettering ourselves, the goal of self-help, the goal of all of that stuff is never perfection, ever. It's never to be better than your fellow man. It's never to be the best meditator in the room. It's never to be the one that learns the most from the classes that they take. It's always to recognize our behavior and live in the pursuit of bettering ourselves as humans. So if that means for election week, Wednesday through Saturday, you're gonna doom scroll and live in feeling bad and or feeling great, like you're gonna be elated and you're gonna, shout it from the rooftops, that's fine. The key is we don't live there. Like we don't ever live in a society where everything is gonna stay exactly static. And that's to your fluidity point, right? Of like, there's an evolution of stuff. And then my encouragement would be on Sunday, in this case, it would be Sunday, we get back to the things that make us feel healthy, the things that make us feel strong, the things that make us feel competent, the things that connect us to our community. All things that we've talked about in mindset over and over and over again about creating spaces where we feel safe, but also sometimes it is about getting up and making the decision to do it, even if we don't want to.
And by the way, I don't want to suggest too that politics are bad. I actually,
I'm fascinated.
I love politics. Like I probably know a little bit too much than most because I'm reading stuff all the time, laws and statutes, the whole thing. I love it. The difference is to the point of what I had mentioned on social media is I don't want to play in the space where I'm having a debate online, and because I think it can get unhealthy. So I'm very aware of like, well, I doom scroll all the time, especially upcoming to the election and election night and the whole thing. I'm watching it like it's a scoreboard, like literally like my basketball team is playing. I'm trying to figure out who's going to win, right?
Yeah.
All those things are my choice, but I'm aware of like what I'm doing. Am I looking for information and data?
Yeah.
That's fine for me or whatever. But also I'm certainly not participating in, keyboard warrior kind of comments or anything like that at all. I don't want to do that.
And side note, there's been some really, really interesting conversations about the evolution of politics that I've sort of leaned towards understanding that like the politics of the 70s are not the same as the politics of the 90s, and the 80s are not the same as the 2000s, and really like trying to understand.
And the party's ideals are not the same.
Well, I even heard somebody, this is not intended to be polarizing, but like I heard somebody say the Democrats of today are like the Republicans of the 80s. And I was like, wait a second, there's really interesting things to understand about that and, how we've evolved as a humanity. I also think that being in my 40s in a time like now, I can't imagine what it would be like to be in my 20s right now in this kind of current climate, but I also can't imagine what it would be like to be in my 60s.
Yeah.
And have gone through everything that we've gone through as a community since, the 70s. It's just, it blows my mind if you think about it for too long. You kind of rabbit
Well,
hole
you
down
know
stuff.
what's happened in politics, what's happened, this is, I don't want to get into political conversation, but you know
We'll
what's
make it
happened?
short. Come on, you got 10 seconds.
So the scale, like if it was like
Yeah.
red and blue was here,
Right.
and you're kind of moderate here, that used to be the scale. And what happens is it stretches and stretches and stretches and stretches, and now so that extreme
Right.
goes from either side. So it, for better or worse, people have more options to find where they fit on this giant scale. So it's not as simplified as it was before. Pro-war, anti-war. It's not that simple.
Right.
Now it's like this whole thing where you kind of idealize one thing on this side, but also you agree with this other thing on this side. So you might not be affiliated to a color or party, but just ideals and policies, and it's
well, and
better or worse.
We've lost some kindness in that too.
Yeah.
So I'll go back to like my core value because I can only speak, for myself, but we've lost some of that kindness. And just to give you guys an idea of what's going on in sort of the therapist world, we're creating some of it as professionals. We're talking about how you can't be a therapist if you did this, and you can't really call yourself a blah, blah, blah if you did. And it's like, okay, wow, like now we're getting into really dangerous territory of you can't come to my house if you did X. And so when you think about, like, I envision when I go to my sister-in-law's house, so it's them, their 4 kids, Tommy and I taking the dog this year, which I'm very excited about, and his parents, their parents, their mom. And we have come to a place of understanding in this section of our family that there are things that we don't talk about because they create conversations that make us feel unsafe. And so there's an understanding of we respect each other and each other's thoughts. We get into heated debates about stuff like, obviously you have 3 generations of people in one house. They're all going to think, hopefully, independently. And so one of the things is we have the hard conversations about what the umbrella is. So the umbrella is safety, right? We want you to come here and feel safe to be who you are. And in encouraging that, we've created an opportunity for you to actually legitimately feel safe being who you are. Because remember, you can say it and not do it. You can say, oh yeah, it's absolutely safe for you to come here. But if you don't at your very core feel safe, then there's something misaligned. And so when you talk about like, Uncle Bob, can you pass the gravy? And Uncle Bob says, yeah, as long as you say you agree with me on this, I'll give you the gravy. Those are the things that need to get eliminated.
I brought my own gravy.
Yeah, right.
Uncle Bob, thank you so much.
Gluten-free. So I think when we think about navigating relationships, there has to be an umbrella of safety at its very core. And there are lots of people right now in the world that don't feel safe.
Yeah.
So my encouragement to the folks that are maybe on the receiving end of I'm not coming this year, or I can't see myself coming this year, try to come from a place of it's really difficult to be a human. There's lots of polarizing and extremity right now. And maybe we can come from a deeper place of understanding for people who want to do something different or try something different this year. Obviously, there's an exception for folks that are not in a place of safety, right? So folks who are struggling with mental health, folks that are struggling with anything that comes kind of seasonally with the weather and things like that. And so the place where you would over encourage people to participate is when you feel like there's safety that needs to be taken into consideration.
So would you categorize that type of tools to use both for like the political conversation as well as the religion conversation, should that decide to come up, or any tough conversation in that kind of setting?
Yeah.
Same applies?
I mean, my boundary is I'm not willing to take this conversation any further. I hope you can respect that.
Yeah.
And ironic, my brother-in-law is a psychiatrist, and he and I have differing opinions about mental health treatment. I mean, like if I went to 5 different mental health professionals, I would get not only 5 different diagnoses.
I think that's the case with any professional.
Yeah, like 5 different opinions on what I should or shouldn't do, what meds I should take, what behavior management I should do. And so when Mark and I debate, it's always coming from a place of wanting to expand our understanding of mental health care in general. He works with a very different population than I do.
Yeah.
So I consider it an honor and a privilege to be able to listen to him tell me about how he cares for people, while also sometimes disagreeing with him and saying that, I might take this opportunity to do that, or I might consider doing something else in that situation.
But the beauty behind that is I would imagine you're both coming from with rules established, which is love, kindness, you both feel safe to have that kind of dialogue. So
Yeah.
my point being is you can discuss whatever topic that
Yeah.
you want, but you can't control the other side. And if the other side doesn't have that, they're not coming to the table with that same level of kindness and understanding, then it tends to go sideways. So
Yeah.
what is your intention? Is your intention to sway, convince, to be heard? I don't know. And I don't know, you may not want to use that as a forum
Right.
if you're walking into a lion's den, so to speak. And by the way, I've been at family dinners or gatherings or what have you, where we may agree on that topic, whether it's politics or religion. I still don't want to have the conversation. I still literally just want the gravy.
Like I'm literally trying to eat my mashed potatoes. Like I really am. I'm trying to like enjoy this and enjoy like the vibe in the room, things like that. You know, I'm a licensed therapist. Everybody on here knows I do this, right? There is a misnomer out there that therapists have to work with anyone who wants to work with them, right? And I don't make decisions based on political party, but I do make decisions based on people who are not open to change.
Okay.
So you have this collection of people who are like, well, of course I have a therapist. Everybody has a therapist, but you're going to therapy to say that you have a therapist, not to do the work around whatever it is that you're looking to address. And you know, it's unethical for any mental health professional to take somebody's money, knowing that they are doing it for some reason other than being invested in the relationship.
Right.
And so I've been a therapist for almost 15 years. There's one instance where I said to my client after several sessions, listen, I understand that this relationship is something that you've asked for and you've invested time in. These are the things that we've talked about. Here's the things that I'm seeing that are of concern for me. And so I confronted this individual and I said, I'm no longer able to provide you with a therapeutic space to be able to process what you say you want to process. I'm going to refer you to these 3 people. I've already let them know that you're going to call them, but I will no longer be able to provide you with the care that you say you're looking for.
I called those 3 people, they never called me back.
Really?
You said you wouldn't tell.
Well, listen, I think you just outed yourself more than now. But I think that, you know, you have the right to say the thing that you need to say. You just don't have the right to like beat it into somebody.
Oh yeah, of
And so
course.
it goes for both sides. I think there are tendencies on all, I mean, maybe we should say all sides, because there's definitely like all kinds of opinions out there. But I think if you can have the courage to say to someone, like, this just doesn't feel safe for me, or this conversation, I'm not open to this conversation. Like, if you can say those things, they don't necessarily have to be a boundary, but if you can say those things and that other person doesn't respect it, that problem is not yours to fix. Like, if Uncle Bob refuses to let you in the house if you didn't vote one way, maybe Uncle Bob's house is not the place for us to go.
Sure.
I don't care how good the gravy is, right?
For sure.
And just because I know there potentially could be a question, I see that there is in the chat. Can we check the chat? Do you mind? Yes. Yeah, Uncle Bob really is taking a beating today. Poor Uncle Bob.
I know.
I have an Uncle Bob too, poor thing.
Is he nice? Hopefully he doesn't fit this.
Gravy, no drama.
I know that we tried to do that.
Oh, yeah. Berlin, what was a good one? I want to know what we said that was smart. Where was I going? Oh, and then because I know that there's going to be a question about this in somebody's mind, whether or not they put it, you know, out loud, the repercussions that come from that are something that you potentially have to handle, right?
Yeah.
So if your mom's brother is Uncle Bob and everybody goes to Uncle Bob's house, regardless, because, oh, it's just Uncle Bob.
Sure.
No. Like the answer is no.
Yeah.
And we as humans and we as people who have to create our own safety nets have to be able to say, it's just not going to happen this year.
Yeah. But I think you can create a boundary in a classy, kind, loving way.
Yeah.
And still hold the line to say, I'm not, like you said, you can change your tradition, whether it's for permanently or for that year. I've spent holidays by myself. That was because I was on the mainland in college, but nonetheless, it's not the end of the world, you know what I mean? You
I
can
mean,
choose-
college holidays are not terrible. Like, I'm good with like ramen noodles and saltines
That's
and like
literally
bad
what my,
movies,
yeah,
right?
it was
Yeah.
kind of a bummer for me, but
I did forget, actually, speaking of, you just reminded me, I forgot to close the circle on the narcissism thing, right? So my clients that are dealing with having family members where they've identified that they not only do they not feel safe, but they don't feel safe taking their families there. So whether they're families with kids or whatnot, they've learned to say, they've practiced saying, we're gonna do our own Christmas this year. And like I cannot even tell you what their face looked like on our first session after Christmas. Like there was so much joy and happiness of all these like new traditions, how much their kids loved it. And it isn't to say that there's anything wrong with Uncle Bob's house, but it is to say that the ability for us to change the environment that we're in can sometimes be one of the most powerful tools. Secondarily to that, are you familiar with gray rocking?
yeah.
How would you describe gray rocking? I don't mean to put you on the spot, but like, how would you describe it for folks that maybe don't know?
This is in how we respond and deal
Correct.
with a narcissist.
Mhm.
And I think it's surrounded around the boundaries that you're putting up
Mhm.
and not allowing them to push and kind of shutting down the dialogue and emotion that goes along with it, right? Just kind of turning that mechanism off.
So gray rocking got its name from literally a gray rock, which is how you are to exist in a situation that's difficult for you, where you know that you cannot find any source of safety in that relationship, but there is something that requires you to stay in that relationship. It was born mostly out of partners who had divorced and had kids, so there was no choice about like you couldn't just go no contact.
Yeah.
There, you still have
You gotta
children
co-parent.
and you got to co-parent. And one of the parties was not able to do that respectfully. So gray rocking came out of, I will do the absolute minimum in the least controversial way possible to get through the situation that I'm in to the best of my ability in the safest way possible. So this would be something like, oh, politics is just one of those things. And then we exit the room. Or, oh, that is a really extreme reaction to a casual conversation. Exit, stage left. I have taken my Thanksgiving plate and stood up from the table. And,
I'm gonna go to the kids' table.
Right, like I'm going to the kids' table because they're talking about Super Mario Brothers, which is now going to date me because that's what was going on when I was a child. But I think, know that there are tools that will help you feel as empowered as you possibly can so that you don't feel trapped and you don't feel like you're drowning. Yeah.
I wonder if we can get Hallmark to make a new card that said, Merry Christmas, I'm starting my own tradition this year. We should just make that a thing.
Do they not have one? Because like,
do they?
we will make an Etsy shop and the Etsy shop will have the postcard, shipping costs only.
There you go.
Let's do
We're
it.
on it. Leanne, she'll design
She's
it.
probably caught with it already.
She actually literally just finished the we're starting new traditions on her phone. She's ready to send it to Printify.
It's gonna be the second bestseller behind Sorry Uncle Bob. Not gonna see you this year.
Uncle Bob.
Uncle Bob, comma, just past the gravy.
Yeah.
Well, how about Uncle Bob? I never liked your gravy.
Oh, whoa.
That's
Whoa.
mean.
Listen, I don't care if you've been making gravy for 50 years. Your gravy stinks. I'm out. But, finding opportunities to connect with people is almost always my recommendation until connecting with people is no longer safe.
Yeah.
Even harder though, like, not to get in the drama of it, but even harder is when you disconnect from someone whom you're in a relationship with because you don't feel safe, but they assume that you're avoiding them and that they are the safest place. Like that's one of the harder ones for me is people are like, what do you mean? I always show up for you and of course I love you. And well, what do you mean you're uncomfortable? And this is the way we've always done it. And those are really, really tricky conversations to have because many of us who want to seek connection,
Sure.
it's like automatic guilt.
Yeah, I get, that's kind of a weird, I mean,
Did
depending
you
on the
just, like, I
dynamic.
saw your shoulders go.
No,
It's
because
like,
I was
maybe it's a
thinking
little
about it,
too
I'm like,
familiar.
that is kind of a weird, to some extent, whether, to whatever degree, that's a weird little trauma bond that you find yourself in,
Yeah.
you know? Could be,
And people pleasers do this with
Yeah.
each other, right? Like when two people pleasers find each other.
Yeah.
They people please themselves to feeling
Right.
guilty and obligated to the relationship.
right.
It's hard.
Mhm. Pass the gravy, anyone?
Does anyone have like thoughts, questions, something about this topic that was like, yeah, I want to go listen to that conversation. Maybe you have an Uncle Bob. Maybe you,
Uncle Bob.
yeah, like maybe not a legitimate, like a literal Uncle Bob, but like I can go through the steps. I don't want to mess them up, which is why I have them next to me. But what I've found from mindset that has become so powerful for the folks that attend is they can ask a hard question and it comes deposited into a safe place. Like mindset has always been one of those kind of soft places where you can land and say like, but what about this? I can start with my own story just while people are percolating, but so my husband and I have been together for 17 years. We've done Christmas we did Christmas for the first 10. We would go to Ohio, visit with Tommy's family, and then we would go to Chicago and visit with my family, and then we would come home. And it became a lot, like just a lot of packing, a lot of traveling. It got to be a little expensive at some
Sure.
point. Like, first of all, flying from Hawaii anywhere is expensive, but like the multiple flights and stuff. And it got to the point where I started to feel a little bit resentful. And so, you know, every good therapist has a therapist. And I go to my therapist and I'm like, why do I feel this way? And she's like, well, do you want to work it out together or do you want me to just tell you? And so I said,
I love the choose your own story option.
Right.
This is great.
So I said, can you just tell me I'm tired? She was like, yes, you're resentful because you don't want to go. It's like, of course I love my sister is one of my favorite people. And she's like, you're resentful because you don't want to go because it exhausts you. Not because you don't like the people, but because by the time you get home, you have to, like, you just left your clients for 3 weeks.
Yeah.
Now you have to show up.
Yeah.
And I think more than anything, the hardest conversation I had was with my sister, who's like literally one of my favorite people. I'm so sorry, but I think it's gotten to be too much. And she said, well, are you still going to Ohio? And I said, yeah. She goes, okay, I get it. And we came up with a compromise. You know, we ended up going in the summer to Chicago, which, I mean, who doesn't want to go to Chicago in the summer? You can go to Cubs games, you can be outside, you know, you can do all kinds of fun stuff. And so we ended up negotiating it, right? And really like having a conversation around what made the most sense for our family.
Yeah.
But I probably wrestled with the aftermath of that decision with myself. Nobody else was giving me a hard time about it. Like, everyone was like, okay, that sounds great. But I probably wrestled with that for a solid 2 years.
Wow. And then since then, that's the new tradition.
Yeah.
So you created your own tradition.
And we did, the first year of COVID, we did end up staying here.
Yeah.
And I mean, like, props to being at the beach on Christmas Day with like hot dogs and chips and a couple of surfboards and like, you know, that was fun too. Like just us two, you know, being together and sort of celebrating our own tradition. But boy, did we miss like the kids and all that kind of stuff too. So that was harder, but I still struggle with the people pleasing aspect of that because I want everybody in my life to be happy.
Yeah.
Right. And we want our people to feel loved and respected and cared for and honored and you know, the truth is sometimes our decisions will create feelings on the other side that like we can't take responsibility for.
Sure.
You know?
Yeah. Anyone else have? That's a good one.
Thank you.
Can you give us more tips on dealing with the guilt trip you get?
Oh.
Yeah. Shameless plug, but like get a mental health professional that helps you feel like you have a safe place to be able to share the way that you feel about things. Like, I can't tell you how many times I've thought to myself, I don't really have anything to tell Melissa, like, why am I doing therapy today? And then I show up and it's like, a bucket full of stuff that I had no idea I wanted to talk about. And that's her talent, right? Like her talent is, even if I show up thinking there's nothing going on, she asks questions that lead to. But what I've worked on, one is reminding myself that making choices that benefit me create a human that shows up even more authentically than when I make choices out of obligation to other people.
Mhm.
And that goes for my sister, it goes for clients, that goes for all of us, right? And so guilt is a response to feeling like you did something incorrectly. What you're reframing is that you are doing something correctly for you, even though it might be disappointing for someone else. So lots of like mantra work, right? Where it's like, it's okay that I'm making a decision that's different than the decision I made before. Or I'm really excited about the other thing that I'm doing. Or replacing whatever you're not doing with something else, which is what we did, right? We turned it into, I'm gonna go in the summer. And mind you, the kids were little at this point. So being trapped in a house at Christmas time, we then took ourselves outside and it was so much more fun, right? Because we could run around at the park and we could go bike riding and we could do all these things that gave us way more option as opposed to just like being inside or bundling up in coats or
I
whatnot.
imagine Home Alone, like it's a
Right.
house with a ton of people, ton of kids running around. It's a lot to deal with.
It's not at their house because we have, my family's smaller than how my side of the family is, but I think guilt is one of those things that speaks to something in your core value that's not getting satiated, right? So you feel guilty because you're disappointing someone, when in actuality, the decision that you're making is something that you're doing for yourself to be a better, continue to be a better version of yourself. So when you do show up, you will be 100% more joyful and much more invested and intentional. If you show up. Yeah. I mean, not to get into a no contact conversation, but like sometimes going no contact is like literally the best thing you can do for yourself ever in your whole life. Like removing yourself from a relationship in which you're being mistreated, even if it's just for a short time. Like remember, we're not making a decision that's like concreted into your soul. Like you can, if someone makes the changes that they need to make and you make the changes that you need to make, you can invite a relationship again in the future. I like to think about the possibility of co-parenting when you have to go as minimal contact as possible. I like the idea that people can evolve, right? But sometimes separating yourself from a relationship can give you just enough awareness of where that relationship created toxicity for you and how to like slowly reintroduce it back into your life or not. You know, that's okay too, but giving yourself that permission.
Where to draw a line between just being selfish, for example, with your parents that are getting older and wanting to visit more, and just doing it for, let's say, for yourself?
It's a really good question.
That's such a good question. So what's the line between selfish and I'm a participating member of this family and there may not be that many years left to be able to connect with each other? I'm gonna get roasted for last podcast for the gentle parenting, but I'm gonna get roasted for this too. There are so many layers, right? There's our cultural, where we come from culturally. There's what the expectations are in our nuclear family. And then there's what we carry internally within ourselves in terms of expectations and obligations. So my first recommendation is for you to, again, physically take a giant step back from the thick of it and consider what's the relationship, what's the why am I in this relationship, and what do I want this relationship to look like when that person's no longer here? What do I want to remember about it? And then where am I potentially experiencing harm? So I think about my
Can I add
brain.
a little element in there
Of
too?
course you can.
I feel like. For me, my parents are no longer here, but another layer for me is emerging from once they pass, not having regrets.
Yeah. And,
And that can come like in a whole
oh,
other layers of layers,
we're
yeah.
gonna have to talk about the grief process at some
Yeah.
point, because grief is such an incredibly complex.
And we have had mindsets on grief.
Yeah,
already
we have.
enough, so.
100%. But I think about my granny. My granny died a couple years ago. She was my favorite grandparent. And like, I think I was probably her favorite grandkid. She only had 2 to choose from, or 3 to choose from, but.
Clearly.
Of course it was you.
And I talked about her a couple of times on Mindset too. She was just like such a spunky, like fierce lady. Her fierce matriarch. My aunt was her caretaker for many, many years as she, kind of dissolved into dementia and forgot where she was, forgot who we were, and things like that. And my aunt gave up everything for years. I mean, she couldn't leave the house for years. My Uncle Tim would often kind of, pinch hit when he wasn't traveling and things like that. But her decision was always, I care more about my mom's final years being comfortable in a home where I have the privilege of being able to care for her. And I'm going to manage the way that I feel about it on my own. And she did. She had a mental health professional. We often talked as niece and auntie about it. But her decision was ultimately, I'm going to talk about the things that bother me in this relationship outside of this relationship, but I'm gonna create a space that's as safe for my mom as possible. And when my granny died, my aunt had no regrets about any of that.
Yeah.
But they also, in conjunction, celebrated the freedom that came with being able to make a decision about their lives, right? So they ended up selling their house and they moved, and now they're sort of living the next kind of chapter after caretaking. So to your point, Alan, she has no regrets, even though she sacrificed for a lot of those years. And there were many conversations in which I said, you have to get help so that you aren't overloaded by this. She was like, I'm good, I'm good, I'm good. But knowing that she really wasn't. And so to answer your question, she decided that she was going to do it wholeheartedly, not out of obligation with resentment, but wholeheartedly. Like, this is the decision I've made. When I need to, I'm going to ask for help. And this is what I'm going to offer my mom in her last years. And the difference between that and I have to do it because it's my mom, there's space in there to explore, like the why, is there another option, things like that. And I know a lot of people come to me and say, I just don't have any other choice. But as you all know, I firmly believe that there's always some sort of choice, even if you don't like what the choice is. Your brain is like stewing over there. Like, I feel like there's like a bunch of, was that helpful?
Yeah, it's more was, as I see, that it's more comes to the decision and sticking to the decision. Because the other side to Alan's view, one therapist told me once, is you will feel guilty anyway in the past. So it's just either you just go with it against what you want to do, or you'll feel guilty anyway.
Yeah.
So it's just more with make the decision and stick to it.
Yeah.
And be okay with not being like the perfect
Right.
daughter or child.
Right.
Just not be okay with them not being okay with you.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, to your point, being okay with the way that you feel about it, but you do have to do it without any sort of like resentment or obligation. Like, you have to reconcile that before you're going to have like the fullness or the completeness of the decision and like really be okay with it.
Another layer I feel in there is like managing like the other party's expectations of things.
Yeah.
As an insulation to your own potential guilt-making feelings that might come up. Yeah.
Yeah. And like what you're going to allow and what you aren't going to allow.
Yeah.
So for a long time, we allowed her to say things that were extraordinarily inappropriate because we knew it was coming towards the end, and we knew that she didn't mean what she said. So we just sort of allowed that. but there was always a tagging in and out. Like there was never one person that was the only person taking the brunt of that. And I think about caregivers in like assisted living homes and stuff, and like the amount of stuff that they sort of have to like let slide off their shoulders.
My
It's like a-
grandma, who had dementia in the last couple of years, never said like a curse word in her entire life, would like call out.
Oh, no.
There's like,
Yeah.
to like fist fights and things, and I'm like,
You're like, who are you? What's
But-
happening?
you know what I was thinking when she brought that up, and I think that's a great point. The thing that I thought of in my brain was, and the tools that you added were fantastic to try to resolve. You have to have a little bit of self-reflection to reconcile,
Yeah.
because the extreme to that is, and we all have these people in our lives too, is I think this phrase or mantra is maybe a little bit overused by some, but we all have people in our lives, or see people even, you know, in our industry that go, that doesn't serve me, I'm not doing that. That doesn't serve me, I'm not doing this. That doesn't serve me. And
Yeah,
they could easily go, well, I'm doing exactly what you just said. I'm
Right.
just, and that's fine. We can control us, not everyone else. But there's that, to me, that's that pendulum on the other side where that isn't necessarily protection, that's self-serving. So
Yeah.
there's that thing. But if you reconcile, what does this mean to me? If I participate or don't participate, can I live with the consequences? In this case, if you're not going to visit your family and something should happen to them, could I sleep at night knowing that that was my last dinner, Christmas conversation?
Yeah.
Those kind of things. I think, and so long as you do that and you're okay with that, then you just gotta, then you live with, you know, what you have.
yeah,
But I think that's a good human kind thing to do, to at least analyze that. But otherwise, if you just go off of the mantra of doesn't serve me, doesn't serve me.
oh, yeah.
I think
I don't
that's
think
gonna-
that's a.
I think it's gonna bite you later.
Yeah. And something that made me think too is I cannot tell you how many times in sessions and even in conversations I've said, what's the expectation that you have right now that you need to look at?
Mhm.
Like if I expect my grandma to be polite and respectful, that's on me,
Yeah,
because I know for sure she's not going to be, right? If I call my family member who I know I have really opposing viewpoints on, and I expect them to come, you know, closer to my side of the belief system, that's on me.
yeah,
And so same with expectations of family members or expectations of ourselves within our family. Like, what's the expectation that you have that's either unrealistic or definitely going to be unfulfilled? Because that's your opportunity to look at yourself and what you can do differently, and where you would set a boundary, where you would, you know, set an expectation, like,
and some of the expectation might be just like, I need a break this year. I don't
Right.
expect them to change their either, whatever the thing
Sure.
is. I'm not trying to change their opinion. I just
Yeah.
I need a break.
yeah,
And if that break is okay for a year, you're like, now you're reset. You can kind of
Right.
tackle this next year.
right. I mean, I really wanted, when I worked at the nonprofit, I really wanted them to change.
Mhm.
And eventually I realized that's such an unrealistic expectation
That's
that I
all of it.
have. Because they know what I need to feel fulfilled, and they're not going to do it. They've made it very clear that they're not going to. So the only option I have is to exit.
Yeah.
And, you know, I exited for lots of reasons. It wasn't just that, but I think if we can have those really honest conversations with ourselves and maybe get some help, like negotiating that, in addition to living in a completely crazy and chaotic world where information is coming at us every 15 seconds, we can find some of those moments of like a little bit of peace, a little bit of breathing, a little bit of, wow, I'm really overwhelmed right now, and I need to go put my feet in some grass because I am going to explode.
Yeah.
And mental health professionals are not immune from that. Like, I cannot tell you, this week has been one of the hardest weeks for me to show up with the people that I need to support, because I have my own stuff to process,
Sure.
right? And it's heavy. So recognizing your limitations, understanding your expectations, and then really deciding what you're going to do, even if the step is small. So maybe the step is like, I'm going to go outside and I'm going to stick my face in the sunshine and I'm going to put my feet in the grass, and I'm going to recognize that at some point everything will be okay,
Mhm.
or more okay than it feels right now. For sure.
I think we're getting close to being done. Is there any questions that we have, or? anyone
Anybody in
want to
the-
insert?
Chat,
Yeah,
Uncle Bob, are you there?
We should have had a carafe of gravy here.
I know,
for
right, just for the,
the symbolism of it.
well, and again, my encouragement is if there's something that you want us to talk about at Mindset, like 100%, Chad and I will debate, discuss.
Never debate.
Do you have a notion what December's topic might be?
No, in fact, I had a topic for November and I kind of put it out there and then said, do you guys have any thoughts on this? And
Crickets?
no,
Oh, okay.
Leanne, was it you and Naomi that had this discussion? They were like, what about navigating? And I was like,
That was
this.
Leanne. Do you want to share anything, or do you want to ask her anything?
Yeah, man, the hot mic.
Since it was you and Naomi's suggestion.
I think for me, I'm on the latter end of, I know there are differences with me and my family, but having felt grief and losing someone in my family, I also feel that tied to like family's all you have, so
Yeah,
whether there are differences or whether you know that you butt heads, like, I think recognizing that that is a smaller fire and that doesn't need to take over
sure.
and kind of, I don't know. Yeah, I just feel like family is so important, so regardless of differences or arguing, like
Yeah,
having that responsibility to work through that to, for the sake of there to be peace.
yeah.
So, yeah, more of a insight, I guess, than a
Well,
question.
And I love that because you've made me remember one of the most important things that I wanted to say today is remember that family is what you make it. So the interesting thing about family is that as we've evolved and progressed as humans, we've also understood that we choose the people that we spend our time with, right? We choose, if marriage is your thing, we choose the person that we're going to marry and create a new family with. And, you know, maybe 15 years prior to that, you had no idea that person even existed, but now they're your like partner and decision maker. And so even in those times of difficulty, when you've had to make decisions about stepping back from family relationships, remember that you can create other families.
Yeah.
And when we have people that we choose to put in our lives and be and feel safe with, that's okay too. Like we have straggler Thanksgiving. So folks who can't go other places or the folks that live in our building or whatever, like we often have this like very kind of rambunctious Thanksgiving with a bunch of people who aren't related at all. And we bring some dogs and everybody hangs out and Tommy's making sliders this year instead of turkey. Like it's all good. But to your point as well, when you take that huge physical step back and you look at the fire that's burning, is it something you want to extinguish for the sake of having continued connection? It's just, that's a really, really good point.
Interestingly, if your result of the loss brought you closer together because you were like, this is so valuable, family is so valuable. Interestingly, when my grandma passed away, that last Christmas was the first that we had, I didn't go. I just remembered that as you said that, it almost like that she was the glue that I was like, I don't really want to go. I don't want to be there.
Interesting.
So, and I didn't even think about this upcoming Christmas, but there's different perspectives, right? Like
Yeah.
for me, I'm not ready to walk into that space with that chair that's empty.
Yeah.
So, I mean, who knows how we all, it's all perspective.
Yeah. When someone of extraordinary significance
Yeah,
leaves us. Yeah.
I'm the same. I have a chosen family. And for me, family is not relatives,
Sure.
it's the chosen family. So you grow a relationship with them and I don't feel obligation to go see my relatives.
I have really been working on this idea of obligation this year. Like that's been like kind of my own personal journey, obviously recovering people pleaser, which I've shared with you guys 1,000 times, but like this idea of obligation is really interesting to me. I've been journaling a lot on it and kind of working with my therapist on it because there's a difference to me between obligation and commitment.
Okay.
Like, if you think about my therapy clients or my coaching clients, like, I don't feel obligated to show up to them. I've made a commitment to show up as my full authentic self.
Mhm.
So when I'm making a decision about potentially canceling a session or moving something, or I'm ill or whatever, I'm still honoring the commitment, but I'm reminding myself and them that sometimes I need to recover from whatever it is before I can show up authentically. I don't do things out of obligation as much as I used to. I think I'm still sort of like playing with the difference between obligation and
That's
commitment.
interesting.
Mhm. You know,
Hmm.
I could probably talk about that for another hour.
Maybe that's the next topic.
Maybe.
That could be our next topic.
The obligation and the guilt alone,
Yeah, and guilt is such a place. We just,
especially people who use that.
oh,
Mm,
So manipulate.
weaponize it.
yeah, like
that's so-
weaponizing your responsibility, like it, oh, my stomach just churned.
Mhm.
It's real big on the Asian culture. We like to throw that one around quite
Yeah.
often.
I have learned
We're
so,
gonna shame the family.
right, oh my gosh. I'm thankful that there's less of that happening in kind of like the current climate.
Oh,
I
is
said less, but remember, like, we are a constant kind of,
We had Hallmark card, remember?
Yeah.
We gotta do the shame card.
yeah, like the shame card.
Please don't
the-
shame me this year,
Yeah.
make that card.
I will only come if you remove this
Yeah.
shame language from.
Because some people are, I don't mean to say unequipped or equipped, but they just have like an arsenal or a toolbox of
Yeah.
things to motivate people with, you
Mhm.
know?
I love how you chose Arsenal and then.
You know, and like,
I
and
mean,
for
depending
some
on the-
people, they have found success in using.
Yeah.
Guilt or shame as their weapon
Of choice,
slash
yeah.
tool. That is most effective
Yeah.
for them, you know,
And
So
then they think it's okay.
and then they think, there you go,
Unless
ding,
you
ding,
call
ding,
them
ding,
out
ding,
on
ding,
that.
yeah.
They're like, but
But they may, you know, but because they're so used to it
Yeah.
too, they'll kind of resist and keep doing it, but then. You need to be, you need to receive the guilt, because it's really on you if it's directed to you and you have a choice in the matter of.
Yeah.
Does it affect me or not really? So if you give, you know, the vibe, like I give 0 fucks about what you are trying to do.
yeah,
You know,
bye, Lisa.
it'll change that, yeah, I feel it'll change that, yeah.
Yeah,
But that's easier said than done, and I realize that, yeah.
Chris, it was nice to see you. Oh,
That's-
happy weekend.
That's a good topic for upcoming. I'm half Japanese and my mom's Jewish.
Oh,
So
God.
so
You have like a double dose of
the guilt crown is
Yeah.
that was bestowed upon me is quite heavy.
Well, and it really started to make sense to me. So I'm adopted, right? And I have biological Jewish in me because my biological father was Jewish. So it's not a religion thing, but
It's in your DNA.
yeah. And so when I found that out, which was much later in life, I realized, I wonder if that's why I'm a people pleaser, because like literally there are whole books written about the idea of you inherit this
Do you say
propensity towards.
oy vey a lot?
I do not.
Oh, okay, just wondering if that's sneaks in
Maybe I
there.
should start.
Yeah. Oy
But-
vey.
Thank you,
That kind of goes
everyone.
into the
Thanks,
whole like
Joel.
nature versus nurture thing too, and yeah. that's
Happy